Ted, a cash basis taxpayer, owned and operated a business. He began having difficulty paying his business debts in late year one. Ted owed Jeff, his computer consultant, $800 for services rendered to his business and $300 for personal services. In year two, Jeff forgave the entire debt of $1,100. Ted was not bankrupt or insolvent. What is the amount Ted will be required to include in income on his tax return for year two? So this question deals with a few things. We notice that the question specifically asks for the amount of income to include on the year two tax return. So we're dealing with a timing issue because we're given year one information, year two information, and we're asked about year two. We're also dealing with the forgiven debt, discharge of indebtedness. So here's what's going on. We have Ted. Ted has this computer consultant. The computer consultant is providing services to Ted, $800 of services for business, $300 for personal services. Ted cannot pay that $1,100 debt. So Jeff, the consultant, forgives Ted in year two. So the idea there is how much of that $1,100 debt that's forgiven will be included in gross income in year two. So that's what the question is asking. But the real question is, when is that $1,100 included, if ever? So one thing to note here is that part of the debt, $800, deals with services rendered to the business and $300 for personal services. Ted is a cash basis taxpayer. The rule is that Ted is allowed a deduction for business expenses when he makes the payment. That's the cash basis. So when Ted paid the $800 for the services rendered to the business, with respect to when he pays Jeff for the computer services with respect to his business, he would get a deduction. So the rule is that if you're allowed a deduction with respect to the amount of the debt, you don't have to include it in income, because the idea is that Ted would have got a deduction anyway, so it would offset. So if we included the $800 in income, we would also have to record a deduction for $800 and they offset. So the $800 portion is not included in income. But the $300 portion is, and this is why. You're not allowed to take a deduction for personal expenses, unless they're things like qualified residence or specific items like property taxes that are allowed under the law. But $300 for personal services related to computer consulting cannot be deducted. So only the $300 portion is required to be included in the year that's forgiven in Ted's income. So the correct answer here is B, $300.